Linda Carter's voice cuts through the quiet hum of the airplane cabin. "Excuse me, I think you're in the wrong seat." Maya Williams looks up, calm but firm. "No, I'm not." Linda scoffs, eyes narrowing as she glances at Maya's clothes, then at the premium class ticket tucked beside her armrest. "Really? You're telling me you belong here?" Her voice is loud, too loud. Heads turn. A few passengers shift uncomfortably. Some pull out their phones. Maya exhales slowly. "That's what my ticket says." Linda leans in. "You know, people work hard for these seats. You can't just, 'Ma'am, is there a problem?'" A flight attendant approaches, hesitant. Linda gestures dramatically. "Yes, I think she's taken someone else's seat." Maya grips her armrest, pulse steady. She's been here before. Different place. Same story. The flight attendant checks Maya's ticket. "She's in the right seat, ma'am." Linda huffs, flipping her designer scarf over her shoulder. "Well, excuse me for making sure. She waves a manicured hand. "What do you do anyway?" "I'm a nurse," Maya says evenly. Linda snorts. "A nurse? Right. Like I'd trust someone like you with my life." The words hit like a slap. The kind Maya has felt before, coated in condescension, wrapped in a smirk. She stays silent, jaw tight. Linda, satisfied with her performance, turns away, shaking her head. "Unbelievable," passengers whisper. Someone chuckles, but no one speaks up. Phones are out. Screens glow in the dim cabin. Some record, some pretend they don't hear. A woman near the window shifts uncomfortably. A businessman clears his throat but says nothing. A young man catches Maya's gaze for a second, then looks away. A flight attendant lingers, watching, then hesitates and moves on. Maya has seen this script before. The silent spectators. The unspoken complicity. She straightens her back. Fine. If no one else will stand up for me, I'll stand for myself. The flight attendant returns. "Can I see your boarding pass, ma'am?" Maya blinks. "You already checked it. Just a routine check." Linda smirks. She's won. The power shift is small, but it's there. Maya's fingers twitch. She wants to argue, to call it out. But what's the point? She hands over the ticket. The attendant scans it, a little too long, then nods stiffly. "You're fine." Linda exhales dramatically. "Well, glad that's settled." Maya clenches her jaw. "Settled? Number?" This isn't new, but that doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. She inhales, slow, steady. She won't give them the satisfaction of a reaction. Linda smirks, flipping through a glossy magazine like Maya no longer exists. The businessman exhales, relieved. Crisis over. The young man scrolls his phone, avoiding eye contact. Maya stares ahead. Her skin burns, but her expression is stone. She knows how this goes. The moment will pass. The flight will land. But the weight of it lingers. It always does. The humiliation is fresh, but Maya won't let it define her. She grips her necklace. A small token from her mother. "Stay strong, baby, always." She isn't just a nurse. She isn't just a woman in the wrong seat in the wrong moment. She is more. And one day, they'll see it. Her mind drifts. Back to another time. Another place. A memory stirs. Flashback. The story isn't over yet. Maya could still hear her mother's voice, steady and firm. "You have to be twice as good to get half as much respect." She was just a child in Atlanta when she first saw the weight her mother carried. Long shifts at the hospital, whispers behind her back, patients who looked past her as if she wasn't there. But her mother never wavered. She treated every patient with dignity, every wound with care. Maya watched, learned, absorbed her strength. One day, she promised herself, she'd follow in her footsteps, not just to heal, but to fight. Nursing school wasn't just textbooks and exams, it was proving, over and over, that she belonged. Professors scrutinized her answers harder. Peers questioned her skills, but none of it stopped her. She wasn't in this for approval. Every patient she saved was a quiet rebellion, a step forward in a system designed to hold her back. This wasn't just work, it was for a purpose, She refused to let doubt, whether whispered or unspoken, define her worth. This flight wasn't just a trip, it was a milestone. Maya had been invited to speak at a medical conference in New York, addressing racial disparities in emergency care. It was proof that her voice mattered. That change was possible. Yet, even at 30,000 feet, she wasn't free from the same bias she had fought her entire career. Linda Carter's sneer, the judgment in her voice, it was familiar. Expected even. But Maya wasn't that little girl in Atlanta anymore. She had earned her place, and no one could take that from her. It was always the same. Patients asked for someone else, assuming she was an assistant, not a trained professional. Supervisors double-checked her work, as if waiting for a mistake. Even now, on this plane, a stranger had looked at her and decided she didn't belong. Maya was exhausted. Not from work, but from always having to prove herself first. Would it ever change? She exhaled slowly. Maybe, maybe not, but she wasn't backing down. Linda's voice still echoed in her mind, but Maya forced herself to let it go. She gripped the armrest, steadying herself. She was here for a reason. One ignorant woman wouldn't take that away, but deep inside, the injustice still burned. And she knew this wasn't over yet. Linda smirked, leaning just enough to make Maya uncomfortable. "So, let me guess," she said, voice dripping with mock curiosity. "You got your job through affirmative action, right?" Maya had heard this before. Too many times. She kept her expression neutral, though the familiar frustration stirred. "I got here the same way anyone else does. Hard work, skill, and dedication." Linda chuckled, shaking her head. "Oh, come on, let's be real. Hospitals love their diversity quotas these days." A few passengers glanced their way. No one spoke. The silence was heavier than the words themselves. Maya clenched her jaw. Ignoring ignorance was second nature by now, but that didn't make it sting any less. The air was cold, and Maya felt it settle deep in her bones. She pressed the call button. When the flight attendant arrived, she offered a polite smile. "Could I have a blanket, please?" The woman barely glanced at her. "Sorry, we're out." Maya nodded, swallowing the irritation creeping up her throat. She knew better than to argue. Minutes later, Linda waved down the same attendant. "Can I get a blanket?" "Of course, ma'am." The response was instant. Within seconds, a neatly folded blanket was placed in Linda's lap. Maya felt her grip tighten on the armrest. A row ahead, James, a businessman with silver-rimmed glasses, watched. His brow furrowed slightly, but he said nothing. James shifted uncomfortably. He had seen it all. The smug tone, the denied request, the immediate compliance for Linda. His instincts told him to say something, but experience warned him otherwise. Years in corporate America had taught him that challenging situations like these rarely ended well. People didn't like being confronted with their own biases. He glanced at Maya, noting how carefully she held herself together. How many times had she gone through this? James exhaled, convincing himself it wasn't his battle to fight. Not yet. He looked away, but the unease sat heavy in his chest. Maya closed her eyes for a brief second. Reacting would be useless. She reached into her bag, pulling out her noise-canceling headphones. If they wouldn't acknowledge her, she'd drown them out. Linda scoffed. "A little sensitive, aren't we?" Maya ignored her, slipping the headphones over her ears. The act wasn't just for peace, it was defiance. But before she could press play, a sharp cry from first class shattered the tense silence. Passengers turned, startled murmurs spreading. The flight attendants rushed forward, urgency in their steps. Maya's body tensed. Instinct kicked in. She pulled off her headphones, scanning the cabin. Something was wrong, and she was trained to help. Linda gasped sharply, her hand flying to her chest. Her breaths turned shallow, rapid. Then suddenly she slumped forward. A ripple of panic shot through the cabin. Passengers jolted upright, some shouting, others frozen in place. The flight attendants sprang into action. "Ma'am, can you hear me? one asked, tapping Linda's shoulder. No response. Someone screamed. Another passenger fumbled with their phone. Maya sat still, her pulse steady even as chaos erupted around her. Years in the ER had trained her for moments like this. But the tension in the air told her this wouldn't be simple. "Is there a doctor on board?" The flight attendant's voice rang out, sharp with urgency. Heads turned, eyes darted around. No one moved. A heavy silence blanketed the cabin. Whispers rippled through the rows. Someone must be a doctor. What about first class? Why isn't anyone helping? Maya exhaled. She was the only one. She shifted forward, ready to speak, but hesitated. Because she saw it. The unspoken tension. Passengers glanced her way, then quickly looked elsewhere. A silent question hovered in the air. Would they even trust her? The weight of it settled deep in her chest. But Linda was running out of time. Linda's friend gripped the armrest, eyes wide with disbelief. "Her?" she whispered. "Can't we get someone else?" The flight attendant faltered, torn between urgency and hesitation. Maya's stomach clenched. Even now, they doubted her? Linda's eyelids fluttered. Her voice was weak, barely a breath. Not her, anyone but her. The words hit like a slap. Maya's fingers curled into fists. She wasn't unfamiliar with rejection. But this was new. The flight attendant hesitated, then turned to the crowd. "Is anyone else a doctor?" Nothing. A beat passed, then another. Maya's pulse pounded in her ears. She could let them struggle, let them beg, or she could do what she'd sworn to do, save lives no matter what. James had seen enough. He stood, his voice cutting through the tension. "You don't have a choice." All eyes snapped to him. Either she helps or she doesn't, and we all know what happens then. His words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken truth. No one argued. The flight attendant swallowed hard, turning back to Maya. The resistance was still there, but now, so was fear. Linda's friend shifted uncomfortably. We don't know if she's qualified." James scoffed. "She's a doctor. That's more than any of us can say." Maya met his gaze. He nodded. No more waiting. It was time to act. Maya scanned the faces around her. Some hope. Some are doubtful. All watching. She was used to pressure, but this was something else. Even in an emergency, she had to prove herself. She inhaled deeply, pushing the weight off her shoulders. "Move." The flight attendant stepped aside. Maya's hands were steady as she checked Linda's pulse, assessing the situation within seconds. She needs oxygen, now. No hesitation, no doubt. Her voice was firm. Confidence. Because that was the only way they'd believe her. As she worked, the murmurs didn't stop. But Maya wasn't listening. She was here to save a life. And she wouldn't let them take that away from her. Maya's fingers pressed against Linda's neck. Weak pulse, rapid breathing. Then she saw it. The swelling, the redness creeping up her throat. Anaphylaxis. She straightened, her voice calm but sharp. "She's going into shock. We need an EpiPen now." The flight attendant hesitated. A what?" Maya clenched her jaw. "Not now, not again. The medical kit, get it, fast." Linda's wheezing deepened. Her hands clawed weakly at her chest. Maya turned to James. "Lay her flat. Keep her airway open." Passengers whispered, some shifting in their seats, unsure. The tension thickened, pressing in from all sides. Time was running out. Maya locked eyes with the flight attendant. "Find that kit or she won't make it." The flight attendant fumbled with the latch, her hands shaking. It's supposed to be here." Maya didn't have time for excuses. Linda's skin turned ashen, her eyelids fluttering. Too much delay, too much hesitation. Passengers gasped as Linda's body jerked, her breath coming in shallow spurts. James grabbed the flight attendant's arm. "Move, let me do it." Maya swallowed the anger bubbling inside her. This wasn't the first time. Watching others scramble, unprepared, while a black woman had to step up. Linda's friend sobbed beside her. "Please, someone help her." Maya's patience snapped. If you want her alive, stop panicking and help me find it. The urgency in her tone snapped everyone into motion. But was it already too late? Maya didn't wait. Couldn't. She pressed 2 fingers to Linda's neck again. Her pulse had slowed. No more waiting. Maya pushed Linda's friend aside. I need space. James, hands shaking, ripped open the medical kit. Is this it? The EpiPen. Finally, Maya grabbed it, clicking the cap off in one swift motion. Hold her still. A deep breath. Then she plunged the needle into Linda's thigh, firm and precise. Passengers held their breath. Linda's body shuddered at the sudden jolt of medication. Maya didn't move, her fingers pressing into Linda's wrist, counting the seconds. Come on. Breathe. James whispered. Is it working? No answer. Every muscle in Maya's body tensed. Not again. I will not let her die. She pressed down on Linda's chest, once, twice. Come back. Silence stretched. Then, a gasp. A sharp inhale cut through the air. Linda's back arched as her lungs expanded, her throat no longer constricted. Maya exhaled slowly. The murmurs started. Oh my God. She's breathing. It worked. James slumped into his seat, relief washing over him. Linda's fingers twitched. Her eyelids fluttered open, glazed with confusion. Her lips parted as if to speak, but then her gaze landed on Maya. Recognition. Then something else. Maya didn't react, didn't gloat. She just nodded and checked Linda's pulse again. Steady now. She would live. The silence in the cabin stretched, heavier than before. Because now, no one could ignore the truth. James let out a breath. Damn, that was impressive. Maya didn't acknowledge it. She didn't need to. Her hands remained steady as she adjusted Linda's position, ensuring her airway stayed clear. No celebration, no validation seeking. She had done her job. Passengers started, whispers buzzing between them. The same people who had doubted her minutes ago now watched in quiet awe. But Maya didn't care about their realization. Her only focus was on keeping Linda stable. Everything else? It didn't matter. The flight attendant cleared her throat. Thank you for... Her voice trailed off. Maya didn't respond. Linda, awake now, avoided her gaze. No gratitude, just shame. But Maya had seen it before. The guilt, the avoidance. And like always, she moved past it. Because she already knew. She had saved the life of someone who never believed she should. The intercom crackled to life. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. A brief pause. Then, I'd like to take a moment to recognize a passenger who, through her quick thinking and expertise, saved a life today. Maya Washington, you're a true hero. A ripple of murmurs swept through the cabin. The same people who had cast doubtful glances at her now sat in stunned silence. For the first time, her credentials weren't questioned. Maya, arms crossed, exhaled slowly. Recognition was rare, but hearing it over the speakers, loud enough for every passenger to hear? That was something new. Applause erupted, hesitant at first, then growing. Even those who had ignored her before now clapped, their faces unreadable. James grinned. Took them long enough. Maya shook her head slightly. Funny how that works. A woman across the aisle, one who had side-eyed Maya earlier, clapped the hardest. An older man nodded toward her. That was incredible. The irony didn't escape her. A room full of strangers who had refused to see her now acted as though they always had. The sound of validation filled the space, but Maya knew better. Respect shouldn't come after proving yourself. It should exist from the start. James stood abruptly, clapping harder than anyone. I think someone here owes Maya an apology. The energy shifted. Applause faded. The air thickened with something heavier. Accountability. Passengers exchanged looks. The flight attendant who had fumbled with the medical kit suddenly found the floor interesting. James wasn't just acknowledging Maya. He was making sure everyone else did too. His voice was unwavering. You doubted her, and she saved a life anyway. A tense silence followed. Then, Finally, movement. Linda's lips parted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you." Linda's hands trembled as she gripped the armrest. Her face remained pale, but her gaze met Maya's for the first time. It wasn't a grand apology, not a speech, just 2 words. Maya didn't react, didn't need to, because buried in that thank you was something deeper. Recognition, reluctance, maybe even regret. She had saved a woman who never would have trusted her. And now? Now, that woman had no choice but to see her. A flight attendant approached cautiously. "Miss Washington, we'd like to offer you a seat in first class." Maya arched her brow. Earlier, she had barely been acknowledged. Now, they were making room for her. James nudged her. Might as well take it. Maya hesitated, then stood. Not because she needed the upgrade, but because the moment itself meant something. She had earned nothing, but she had taken everything. She walked forward, head held high. As Maya sank into the plush first-class seat, James smirked from across the aisle. "Guess you belonged here all along." She exhaled. Belonging had never been about where she sat, but sometimes life had a way of putting you exactly where you were meant to be, and making sure everyone else saw it too. If you were in Maya's position, how would you have reacted? Would you have stepped up despite the doubt and bias? Or would you have let their assumptions define the outcome? Was Linda's gratitude real, or was it just relief in the moment? Do people truly change after experiences like this, or do they revert to old habits? Let's talk. Does accountability lead to transformation? Have you ever faced racial bias in a critical situation? Share your story in the comments. Your experience could change someone's perspective. If this story resonated with you, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Let's keep these conversations alive. Because real change starts with awareness.